All right, it's October 25th. Dan and I just split up. It's our first day here in Southern Ohio. I had no really intentions of coming back down in this area and hunting in 2021, but when Dan Infalt calls and says he wants to come hunt Ohio with you, you hunt Ohio. It's the morning of October 26th. We're in here scouting a bottom that I've scouted, ran cameras, hunted in the past, that typically or historically has held a couple good deer, but most of the sign that we're finding down in this bottom is a smaller sign. We were hoping we could get on some bigger sign down the bottom before we went up in elevation and really dove into it, but we're just not finding much. I think the plan is I think that there's a cut within a mile or two here, a new clear cut. So we're gonna go try to find that, scout it, and then just keep putting boots on the ground until we find something big that we like. The one camera that we did check yesterday just had some smaller bucks. The biggest deer hunter is maybe 130, an older deer that's downhill, but we'll just keep putting boots on the ground and see if we can't find something we like.
We looked at a cornfield that most people wouldn't see. It was really hidden from the road on some private land, and thought, let's look at the ridges above it. And honestly, it doesn't look like the deer are dropping to that cornfield. We're still a long ways from it. But there's 2 points that come down here, and the sign comes together at these 2 points with a lot of scrapes. There's some scrapes behind us here that one after another that got a big track in it that look real aggressive. I mean, some of them don't even have licking branches. It looks like the deer was really worked up. And we got a bedding point over here and a bedding point over here, and they meet right here. And from my experience, you get these bucks that are competing in bedding. They'll race to these scrapes here to be the first one to leave their scent. There's a good rub coming off of that point. You can see the trail that's got the scrapes on it coming from here. So there's 2 different bucks coming in here, I think. There's a nice tree hanging over the edge right here. I think that's the spot. A guy could get in there and shoot all this and have his thermal drop down that ridge when it gets calm, if it gets calm. If it doesn't, the wind is okay. I don't think we go any further. I think we just turn around and go find some more spots. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. So last night on our way out, we actually caught a buck crossing the road, probably, what was it, Dan, an hour? Half hour after dark?
Yeah, I doubt it was an hour, but it was close to it.
So we just marked that on a map and looked at some potential ridge systems, bedding opportunities, whatever you want to call it. And we're only, I don't know, 80 yards from the truck, and just got a pretty nice rub. It's not super fresh, but it's not super old either. So we're just gonna keep walking this ridge system and see if we find anything. There's some old signs, some old rubs in here. It wasn't a giant deer, but pretty decent one.
So me and Chad went down and scouted an area over here that looked good. Looked kind of isolated, remote way in. Didn't look like a lot of people would get back there. We found a bunch of scrapes and some nice rubs. And it looks like the deer are bedded up on top of this hill and they're dropping down to a private cornfield. We're gonna start by hunting close to the cornfield because I got an inkling they might be right up at the top of that hill and not far away. If they don't show up tomorrow, we'll just dive in deeper.
It is Thursday morning, and Dan and I are headed into the area that we had scouted and hunted yesterday. We scouted the back edge of this cornfield where all that sign was, and set up not too far, kind of on opposite sides of a point where we were both basically monitoring 2 different bottoms. And the area that I was in, we had some does come down through about 6:30, and then there were a bunch of more deer that came down at closing time when it was dark, and I couldn't see or tell what they were, but they were moving. They were coming from a little ways off. My plan tonight is just basically go up and get a little bit deeper, but because I was covered up in deer, I had to wait to tear down. So as I was tearing down, I met Dan back on the other side of this bottom, and he had cut a pretty big track over here. He didn't see any deer, but cut that big track. And as I came over to meet him, there was a deer blew at us further up this bottom. So that's what we're going into kind of scour right now, is kind of work up this draw where Dan cut that big track, and see if there's any sign from where we heard that deer last night. There's like a thermal hub that Dan found up there that has some bedding opportunities. So we're gonna sneak up this bottom and see if we can't find any more sign.
Looking at the way that the property lays out up there, they just about got to be bedding there. There's hiking trails all the way around that thermal hub will kind of force them into there. So I'd have to think they're coming from there, don't you think?
Yeah, I think looking at the map, I think that you're right. I mean, you were right about the deer that I saw last night being closer. I would have thought that they were further away. It was 7:30 when we were, or 7:20, I guess, when we were right here talking last night, and a deer was still a ways away. So
yeah,
the proximity of that would make sense.
this is a pretty good sign. This is where that big track comes down there. It's just a matter of following this thing back to where it's coming from. I'm sure it's coming from that thermal hub. But the track back there was, we should have got some film of it yesterday when we found it, but we were in a hurry to get set up. There's a pretty good rub line going through here. Coming right down to those scrapes.
What's up there?
Another rub. Perennial, it's been hit this year and past years. This year's has just been touched. This is looking pretty good. There's a giant one over here. Let's take a look at that one.
Okay.
This one's been rubbed for years and years and years. Looks like the backside of that giant bent willow is rubbed too. Yeah, look at this, man. Holy crap, come over here. Look at this. What's interesting is there's something really aggressively hitting here. If it's the front of his rack going down or a drop or something, I don't know. But look at this, these claw marks in here. Do you see that?
Yeah, well, this tells me that deer's pretty wide because it almost looks like brow tine.
Yeah, so if he's got his head tilted down, it might be the tips.
Yeah.
But you'd think his rack would be around like this. There'd be something dropping down doing that. Is it on both sides? It does not seem to be.
Not a bunch on this
So it
side.
seems like something on his left side is doing that. Like maybe he's got a drop or something.
Inside point or something.
This is looking pretty cool, ain't it?
Yeah, looks good up here. Starting to get a little thicker in this.
Take a look at the map where we're at. See if it's leading towards that, where we think it's coming from, or if it's going up higher. I bet you it's coming from where we think. Big fresh bed. That's a big body size too.
Yeah.
You see that was a huge animal that laid there. See the body size?
Yeah. You don't think we booted him out there, did
We
we?
may have, because if you look, that branch is freshly broken.
Green, yeah.
And it's crushed down from him laying on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't this morning, it was last night, because last night we had that deer blowing up here.
Yeah.
This might have been him.
I mean, there's older up there right next to it, too.
Those leaves are crushing up. It looks like he laid there a couple days in a row. Yeah, this deer wasn't here long ago. It was either today or it was yesterday. I think we still should go a little further.
Look at the topo map on this. This would still be the lower portion of this ridge. I don't think this is below halfway.
Yeah, but it's the first bench.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's critical. This bench is what's causing all this action right here. Because if you look, we've been on the bench, and otherwise they're walking through this rocky crap or they're walking on a straight ledge.
Yeah.
I think we need to get to the mouth of that draw and set up there, and then back out and make a setup up the draw someplace in the thermal hub we're looking at. But I think that this bench probably needs to be hunted right where it goes up that draw.
Right. Yeah. It probably goes right straight around the top of the mouth.
So this draw turns here, goes up. There's a bench here that comes in, a bench here and a trail, and then a lower bench. And we had picked up a lot of sign down lower. You know, when you get to this point, everything kind of comes together and you see rubs going down to where we had the rubs lower, and everything meets at this point. And what we believe is a mature buck would bed in this draw up here. So I think if we push any further and kicking them out, this is like that threshold where you don't want to go further. There ain't much sign right here. The sign's back further, but we're on the same trails coming from in there. I think this is the setup. And looking at this with a nice wind dropping down, a thermal drop, you can cover this little opening from that tree right there. And you don't have to trim anything out of here. And you can cover every trail, the one that splits down there and the ones that split from right here. Hopefully that buck comes in here. I think you'd feel plenty safe moving in here in daylight. There's no human sign in here at all. We're just using a GoPro, so you probably can't see it very well. But we're trying to figure out exactly how he's coming through here, because Chad thought maybe that tree here, they could get around us a little bit. And I kind of agree, I just didn't want to go too much further. But we saw this deadfall here, and we're like, well, they ain't getting through there. There's a bunch of deadfalls up there he ain't getting through, so we figured he's coming through this gap. And looking up there, I spotted a rub that is just gigantic. The middle of the rub is this high off the ground. But we're not going to go over there and film it because we're going to hunt it probably out of that tree now. We kind of changed our mind. It could be that we got too aggressive because we've already hit one big bed. But I think this is where we need to be. And hopefully that deer's around the corner enough that he doesn't know we've been here. But this aggressive moves, either you see nothing or you see it all. And I think this site killed really big stuff. And there's obviously something really big living here, so all or nothing my last night, right there. Now let's go check and see if that thermal hub has activity like this, and maybe we can cover everywhere this deer could be. And even if we bumped him here, he might have went to the thermal hub. Then that might be the spot. So let's go take a look at that. It's always a good thing to be the first one in line, because if you're the guy in front, you stumble on the sheds. See what I see? It's old enough, this might even be our boy.
It's been sitting there for, that's not last year's.
That's a couple of years old.
Yeah. What was I telling Joe last night about finding more sheds in October than
right
in shed season?
And he was like looking at you goofy going, it'd be all chewed up. There ain't a chew mark on this thing, anywhere. Well, that's cool. So we just picked up the shed. I took 2 steps, literally, and I looked down, and there's a balloon. You see it? And that's the only balloon I've seen on this whole trip. Fish.
We're down in here in this bottom of where Dan was talking about that thermal hub, and the draw that where we think that deer's bedded where Dan's gonna hunt tonight is over here. But we just wanted to come down in this bottom and see if he's using any of these points down coming into this thermal hub. There might be a possibility for another set off of one of these points. And what we're finding is just a bunch of scrapes underneath these beech trees and just some smaller rubs.
One thing that's key though is that the one scrape where we can make out a fresh track, it was probably his track. It was a big track. I could fit my whole hand in it. Where the other scrapes over by the cornfield, a lot of them were small except for the one that had his track in it. So it might be limited sign, but it's his sign.
We're just gonna poke around in here just a little bit further. It's getting kind of late in the afternoon and we still gotta go back to camp. So we just literally, that spot where we just turned the camera off where we found the scrapes. And so a small sign. Dan spotted this bigger rub, and it's probably just above knee high, so it's not real high. But the cool thing about this is probably a 5-inch diameter tree, and there's only 2 tine marks here. Like, so it looks like it's brow tines just grooved into this tree, and it looks, I mean, deep gouges, and there's nothing around the tree, so it tells you that that deer is relatively wide with only just these 2 gouges being rubbed like that. There's no shavings on top of the leaves, so it's not super fresh, but it's from this year. It's from probably the last couple of weeks. But he's been down in here at some point, and the big rub that you found had those tine marks like that on the front. So I think you're right with that big track, and these rubs, it's the same deer.
Yeah, so we're probably onto his bedding areas.
As I walk back to the truck, I'm kind of just recapping the last couple of days, thinking about things I would do different. Obviously you're out here to kill deer, but the reality of it is a lot of times it doesn't happen. But the most important thing, regardless if you fill your tag or not, it's important to learn, pick up new things, and just keep evolving as a whitetail hunter. Anybody watching this video, common sense, you get the chance to spend time with guys like Dan, scout with them, see how they look at things differently than most. I think anyone jumps at the opportunity to be in my shoes. So I feel pretty humbled, feel pretty blessed to have spent the last 4 or 5 days with him. There's a handful of things that I've picked up on that I'm kind of thinking about. A lot of it revolves around slowing down, which may seem odd to some because, everybody wants to be aggressive. Everybody wants to scout, hunt. Doing that, from what I saw with Dan, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, I talked to him about this. It's scout, scout, scout. When you find what you're looking for, it's time to slow down and analyze all the little details of that sign. It could be, you know, grabbing caps off of acorns. You got some deer sign, deer and some acorns mowing around. Maybe you're not seeing fresh rubs or fresh scat, so it may be hard to tell, especially in a rocky, hard soiled area like this. It might be hard to tell when those deer were in there eating those acorns. And just picking up caps, flipping those caps over at the underside and seeing if they're weathered or not will give you some insight, you know, how fresh that sign is. So that's one thing I picked up on. The other thing is, you know, we had the opportunity to follow some big sign, a big rub line. You know, it was real obvious direction of travel, what the deer was doing, because it was obvious sign. But in between those big rubs, there was a lot of less obvious stuff that I was walking past. He would pick up on a branch broke at, you know, 4.5 feet, 4 feet off, 5 feet off the ground from a rack buck going through and breaking a branch. Looking at scrapes, looking for big tracks, big sign, looking at the tracks, looking at the terrain, and trying to determine how that deer was using the terrain in relation to that scrape or that sign. How aggressively were the tracks that were being, you know, where the ground was being pawed in that scrape, how aggressively was that deer pawing the ground? So those are some of the little things that I picked up on this week that I think is ultimately gonna make me a better hunter in October. Knowing when to go fast and cover ground, and then when you find sign, become a detective. Become a detective in the way that you would break down a crime scene and look for finite clues, the small stuff that 90% of us overlook, but the guys who are killing big deer on a consistent basis are picking up on. Recapping this trip, even though we didn't kill anything, we were able to get on some deer, and I learned a few things. So hopefully all you guys can take those words for what it's worth, put it in the back of your mind, your arsenal, and when you find yourself in a situation, maybe you can reflect on some of those words and it'll help you guys be successful.